Low setting strip Black Myth. Wukong down to the cleanest, most basic version of itself. Textures flatten, details disappear, and the world loses most of its artistic depth. Surfaces that normally show cracks, scratches, or fabric patterns turn into simple color blocks. Wukong's fur becomes a smooth texture with almost no strand definition. The environment becomes noticeably empty. Grass is thinner, foliage is reduced, and small decorative objects are removed, giving the world a more open but less immersive feel. Shadows also become simplified, losing soft gradients and natural depth. Lighting turned functional rather than atmospheric. Torches, fire, and moonlight no longer spread rich illumination, and the overall scene feels brighter but flatter. The visual downgrade, however, has one big benefit: clarity. With less clutter on screen, combat becomes much easier to read. Enemy silhouettes stand out sharply, and attack animations become more noticeable. During fast sequences or boss fights, nothing overwhelms the view. Particle effects are minimal, there's no heavy fog, and lighting transitions are subtle. This makes dodges, parries, and counterattacks visually clean. Atmosphere takes the biggest hit. Forests lose their mystery. Temples lose their ancient weight, and weather effects become extremely basic. Distant landscapes shift to low detail models, making the world feel more game-like and less cinematic. But the gameplay readability improves. Movements are easier to track, hit effects are cleaner, and the screen stays visually stable even during chaotic encounters. Low preset removes immersion but enhances visibility. It's the version that prioritizes simplicity, clarity, and clean motion over dramatic visuals. Medium settings bring Black Myth Wukong back to a more natural state after the stripped-down look of low. Textures regain detail, not fully high-end, but enough to give surfaces proper definition. Stone walls show cracks again, with Gain's grain patterns, and Wukong's fur looks more layered and believable. It's not cinematic, but it no longer feels unfinished. The world becomes noticeably richer. Foliage returns in moderate density, filling forests and pathways with more life. Ground surfaces look more natural with uneven patterns, dirt variations, and subtle shading. Shadows also improve. They're sharper, more consistent, and give objects a proper sense of depth. Lighting starts to feel warmer and more atmospheric, especially around torches, lanterns, or sunlight breaking through trees. Combat readability stays strong, but the world now has more personality. Attack animations remain easy to track, yet the environment feels less empty. Sparks, dust, and small particle effects become more visible, giving hits a bit more weight without overwhelming the screen. Boss fights look richer. Their arenas feel more lived in, and visual cues stand out well against slightly more detailed backgrounds. Atmosphere improves noticeably. Fog in the distance gains a soft gradient, and environmental color tones look more balanced. Weather changes, like rain or mist, carry more texture and depth compared to low. Distant landscapes regain mid-level detail, making the world feel larger and more alive. Medium preset is the first setting where the game looks complete. Not cinematic, not over-detailed, but visually believable. It maintains the clarity of low, while adding enough richness to keep the world immersive. Medium equals balance. A world that feels alive without becoming heavy, visually upgraded without sacrificing readability, and detailed enough to feel right for most players. High settings are where Black Myth Wukong finally starts showing its real identity. Textures become significantly sharper. Stone, metal, armor, and vegetation gain detailed patterns that make the world feel handcrafted. Wukong's fur regains layered definition, reacting to light with more realism, and giving the character a more grounded presence. Environmental density increases enough to make each area feel rich without feeling overloaded. Trees have fuller canopies, ground surfaces show deeper imperfections, and vegetation varies more naturally across the terrain. Shadows gain proper softness and behave more dynamically, following characters and objects with smoother transitions. Lighting takes a major step up. Sunlight diffuses more realistically. Torches cast warm gradients, and reflections on wet surfaces have more depth. Atmospheric elements like fog, mist, and light rays start blending into the environment instead of looking separate. Scenes gain a sense of mood, especially in forests and temple corridors where layered lighting enhances immersion. Combat becomes visually impactful without losing clarity. Sparks from weapons look richer, particle effects have depth, and hit interactions feel weightier. Unlike low or medium, where visuals are cleaner but less expressive, high brings cinematic flair while keeping attack sequences readable. Boss arenas feel more dramatic. Environmental lighting reacts naturally to movement. Shadows shift across the ground, and particle-heavy attacks create more visual intensity. But it never gets messy. High preset stays controlled enough that fast combat remains easy to follow. Distant landscapes see a meaningful upgrade. Mountain textures, temple silhouettes, and large structures regain detail that adds scale to the world. Environments feel bigger, deeper, and more alive. High preset delivers a strong balance of beauty, atmosphere, and clarity. It's the first setting where Black Myth Wukong looks truly polished, immersive, and visually satisfying without tipping into excess. High equals cinematic detail with practical usability. Rich visuals without clutter. Very high settings take everything from the high preset and push it into a richer, more dramatic presentation. The world gains a noticeable boost in sharpness and density. Textures now show deep micro details like scratches on armor, layered stone erosion, and more realistic material separation. Wukong's fur looks fuller, with finer strands catching light in a more natural, dynamic way. Environments feel significantly more alive. Vegetation density increases, not just in quantity, but in variation. Different plant types, different shapes, and more natural layering across the terrain. Rocks and structures show complex shading and stronger normal maps, giving every surface more physical presence. Nothing looks flat anymore. Everything has depth. Lighting becomes one of the standout upgrades here. Shadows soften and curve more realistically around objects. Light bounce feels richer, and bright elements like fire or magic abilities illuminate the environment with more subtle gradations. Atmospheric fog thickens and interacts with lighting in a way that makes environments feel heavier and more immersive. Sunbeams, ambient haze, and volumetric pockets of air all blend to create a more cinematic mood. Combat intensity ramps up visually. Particle effects become more layered and impactful. Sparks scatter with more detail. Dust bursts look thicker, and magical attacks glow more aggressively. Yet readability remains surprisingly intact because Very High doesn't overload the scene. It simply makes everything feel more textured and dramatic. Boss fights especially benefit. Arena lighting reacts dynamically. Environmental shadows move smoothly across the ground, and every ability from both Wukong and enemies leaves a stronger visual footprint. The world feels larger, darker, and more atmospheric without hindering visibility. Distant landscapes experience a substantial jump in fidelity. Cinematic preset transforms Black Myth Wukong into its most visually intense and atmospheric form without ray tracing. This is a point where every asset, every shader, every environmental effect is pushed to its highest non-RT quality. Textures reach maximum sharpness. Armor shows tiny scratches and layered damage. Stone surfaces reveal deep weathering. Cloth fibers become individually defined. And Wukong's fur looks almost lifelike with thick strand detail and natural light response. The world gains incredible density. Vegetation becomes lush and full, with layered ground coverage that makes forests feel wild and untouched. Shadows behave with realistic softness and smooth transitions, creating deeper mood and stronger visual storytelling. Lighting is dramatically upgraded. Fire sources glow richly. Sunlight diffuses through leaves with convincing rays. And indoor scenes feel filled with warm, volumetric atmosphere. Combat becomes strikingly cinematic. Particle effects erupt with more layers, more brightness, and more complexity. Sparks scatter wider. Dust clouds swirl realistically, and magical hits burst with vibrant, glowing impact. Even motion blur and camera movement feel more refined, giving battles a trailer-like visual intensity. Boss fights become visual spectacles. The arenas feel handcrafted with higher detail, dramatic lighting, and dense atmospheric effects. Every movement casts detailed shadows, fire attacks illuminate entire areas, and swirling particles react beautifully to the environment. The mood becomes heavier and more emotional, amplifying the weight of each encounter. Distant landscapes also shine at this preset. Mountains, temples, and large structures far away show fine detail and strong atmospheric layering, giving scenes a sense of epic scale. Weather effects, fog, rain, wind look richer and blend naturally with environment lighting, creating a world that feels alive and breathing. Cinematic preset isn't about practicality. It's about presentation. It's the version you use when you want the game to look its absolute best without enabling ray tracing. Extremely detailed, deeply atmospheric, and visually expressive, this preset pushes Black Myth Wukong to the edge of pre-render quality. Cinematic equals maximum beauty, maximum mood, maximum visual impact. The game at its most dramatic. Ray tracing low instantly changes the visual character of Black Myth Wukong, even though the setting is only the entry point into the RT pipeline. The first thing you notice is the improved light behavior. Instead of lighting feeling pasted onto surfaces, illumination begins reacting more physically. Fire sources cast more believable gradients, reflections sharpen slightly, and the world gains a layer of depth that wasn't present without RT. Shadows become noticeably more accurate. They detach from objects more naturally, follow geometry with better precision, and soften based on distance instead of using fixed, simplified patterns. Even though this is the lowest RT tier, scenes begin to feel anchored. Objects sit more convincingly in the environment because their shadows behave more realistically. Reflections get the biggest upgrade on RT low. Shiny surfaces, puddles, metal edges, and wet ground start reflecting shapes more correctly instead of using static screen space approximations. It's not fully accurate ray tracing, but the reflections now carry the right directionality, and they respond more believably to lighting changes during movement or combat. Ambient lighting improves too. Dark areas don't look like flat, unlit spaces anymore. They gain subtle light bounce, making caves, temple interiors, and shaded forest paths feel more natural. Highlights no longer abruptly stop. They fade smoothly across textured surfaces, giving every area a more realistic mood. Combat shows the upgrade in small but meaningful ways. Dodges and parries cast more consistent shadow transitions. Fire-based enemy abilities throw reactive light into the environment. Metallic surfaces on weapons or armor briefly catch glints of light that shift depending on angle and animation speed. None of this is overwhelming. RT low keeps everything light and controlled. Atmosphere thickens slightly. Fog pockets blend more realistically with surrounding light. Environments don't just look brighter or darker, they look like they are lit correctly. Sunlight filtering through trees feels more grounded, and interior lighting feels more cohesive. What makes RT low interesting is that it brings subtle realism without disrupting readability. The game doesn't suddenly become visually noisy. Instead, it enhances mood while keeping clarity intact. Scenes feel deeper, but combat remains easy to follow. Overall, RT low adds an important layer of physical accuracy. Better shadows, more believable reflections, improved global light behavior, and richer atmosphere, without heavy performance or visual clutter. Ray tracing medium is where Black Myth Wukong begins to feel truly grounded in physical lighting. The jump from RT low isn't subtle. The entire scene gains visibly more accuracy and depth. Shadows, reflections, and indirect lighting behave with far more realism, and the world looks like it's responding to light in ways that match real materials instead of approximations. The first major improvement is shadow precision. RT medium tightens the edges, softens gradients, and tracks object movement more accurately. When Wukong runs through forests, shadows from leaves and branches shift naturally across his fur. In temples, objects cast more layered, convincing shadows that fade smoothly with distance. Everything feels more connected, more believable. Lighting becomes dramatically richer. Sunlight filtering through trees gains realistic volumetric scattering. Torches illuminate walls with smoother gradients instead of multiple backlight steps. Fire effects brighten nearby surfaces with a warmth that reacts dynamically as the light source flickers or moves. Even indoor environments gain subtle ambient bounce, preventing dark corners from looking flat and lifeless. Reflections also upgrade significantly. Surfaces like wet stone, polished wood, Puddles, weapon blades, and armor plates begin reflecting their surroundings with noticeably better accuracy. RT medium reduces that shimmering or approximation look that RT low still retains. You see proper directional reflection. Things reflect based on real angle and lighting, not just screen data. Atmospheric depth takes a big step forward. Fog blends seamlessly with lighting, gaining color variation and smooth density transitions. Mist zones and forests feel thicker and more cinematic, and open-world areas look more atmospheric even without heavy volumetric effects. Boss arenas, especially those involving dark lighting or fire, ray tracing very high is where Black Myth Wukong reaches its peak physical accuracy without crossing into absurd over-stylization. This is the full-strength ray trace presentation. Shadows behave like real shadows, light moves like real light, and reflective surfaces respond with near-photoreal accuracy. The game's environments suddenly feel denser, heavier, and deeply atmospheric. Shadows undergo the most dramatic upgrade. They become fully dynamic, reacting instantly to movement with precise edges and perfectly natural softening based on distance. Foliage casts intricate layered shadows that shift and flow across Wukong's body. Large structures project deep, realistic shadow gradients across the ground. Even small objects, branches, rocks, fabric, weapon edges generate accurate shadow shapes that change depending on angle and light intensity. Lighting becomes intensely physical. Sunlight doesn't just brighten surfaces. It fills spaces with soft, diffuse illumination and believable bounce. Torches create warm, volumetric halos that interact with dust and smoke. Fire attacks during boss fights illuminate arenas with multi-layered glow, bright cores surrounded by fading orange and red rings. Every light behaves like a real light source, with depth, spread, and dynamic intensity. Reflections reach near real accuracy. Puddles reflect characters and environment geometry correctly, with subtle distortion and depth. Metal armor pieces shine with high-fidelity highlights that shift precisely with animation. Wet surfaces produce convincing reflection blur, creating a cinematic look without losing realism. RT Very High eliminates the screen space look almost entirely. Reflections behave like they belong in the world. Atmosphere becomes richer and heavier than any other preset. Fog, mist, smoke, and environmental haze don't just sit in the scene. They react to lighting, gaining depth, movement, and visual presence. Boss arenas filled with fire or magical energy look absolutely intense because the environment absorbs and bounces at light naturally. Indoor lighting, especially in temples, caves, and deep forest interiors, gains dramatic realism. Shadows layering across ancient stone pillars, fire pits reflecting off-floor surfaces, and ambient light creeping into corners all combine to give interiors a stunning sense of weight and spatial complexity. Combat becomes the most cinematic it will ever look without losing clarity. Sparks, spell effects, and parry flashes now light up both Wukong and environment with physically accurate illumination. Every movement feels like it has visual force behind it. Ray tracing very high is the setting for players who want the absolute maximum visual depth, true-to-life lighting, flawless reflections, and atmospheric density that feels handcrafted. It's the closest the game gets to looking like pre-rendered footage during live gameplay. And that wraps up the complete Black Myth Wukong graphics test on the RTX 5060. If this breakdown helped you even a little, hit like. It tells YouTube the video from Respawn Sam is worth pushing. And if you want more honest side-by-side tests and real comparisons, tap subscribe to Respawn Sam. I upload the kind of content that actually helps you decide what to play. No fluff, just facts. Drop a comment telling me which game or GPU you want tested next. I read every single one. Alright, I'll see you in the next video.